All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Dave Shamszad. Dave, welcome, man. So awesome to have you.
Great to be here, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And, this is really cool because you and I already had a conversation last week, and we spent about an hour or so getting to know each other. And it's very interesting because I was telling you before we hit the record button that over the last couple of years, 2.5 years, we're into this podcast and hosting this. And I will tell you that this has been the most rewarding thing I've done in my 28 years now as an entrepreneur.
Awesome.
And it has, for a guy like me who gets to facilitate relationships that impact millions of people's lives, this podcast has become such a valuable tool. And even doing these recordings of these interviews, and like in our case, I've already got somebody that is waiting for us to release this episode.
I know we haven't even released it yet, and you've made a valuable, and you've made $1 million connection. So I appreciate that.
Yes, and so I'm looking forward to making that connection for you too, as soon as we get this interview in the can.
That's right. Right.
And this is a first. That is a first, which is really cool, And so what I want to start really quick by giving a shout out to the folks over at the podcast guest platform. That's how you and I met. I have met amazing entrepreneurs through that platform. So I just want to give a shout out to those guys and the work they're doing. And then I'm going to turn it over to you, Dave, because I want to, give you the opportunity to set some context and let the listeners know, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work you're doing and the impact you're making in this world, and give us some of the backstory as well.
Okay. So you want the whole thing? You want the backstory as well? Okay, you got it.
Absolutely. Well, especially from you.
Okay. So this podcast must be it's not censored then.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not.
All right. Hey, he asked for it. Guys.
There you go.
So thank you again for having me, and glad to be here. I really enjoyed our conversation. And so my name's David. I'm from the Bay Area. I'm currently in the Bay Area in Berkeley, California. I own a real estate management, investment, and brokerage here in Berkeley, California. So we've been around since 2012. So what we do is we invest in properties. We operate big multifamily or commercial properties. We buy and sell and lease buildings or spaces in those buildings. And then we have our own crew that works to improve and maintain and repair those buildings. So kind of a vertically integrated shop in the investment property space. And things are great. We own a dozen or so buildings, and we manage another 100 or so buildings. So all told, we are operating about 2,500 units or doors, so to speak. So we probably have, anywhere from probably 5,000 or more individuals that we get the opportunity to rent to and hopefully impact their life in a really positive way.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
And then as far as the backstory, okay, so it wasn't so that's where I'm at now. And when I started the company, and things are good. We've got about 50 people that we employ, and we've grown steadily year over year. But when we started, it was 2012, and I started in an office sublet that I bought, shared with some guy, and I had 2 clients and with one computer. I mean, that was what I started the business with. And so, like, why did I do that, and how did that all come to pass? So I had been working in real estate for a few years, and had a little book of some experience in a little book of business. But what really prompted me to start the company and kind of follow like the entrepreneurial inspiration that that I had. So for like the decade prior, I was really struggling and had I had major battles with mental illness and addiction. And I'm an alcoholic today. I haven't had a drink in 11 years, but still very much an alcoholic, and recognize that every day. In my early 20s, I had just started to develop mood swings, and something new was going on with me. I was having kind of days at a time where like I was not feeling, it was a little worse than just like your normal wrong side of bed kind of feeling, right? And I started like, man, something's up, something's going on here. Like I'm not just feeling a little bit like in a bad mood. I feel like there's a weight on top of me keeping me from getting up out of my bed, and brushing my teeth seems like the hardest thing in the world. And that was unusual for me. I've always been kind of like, hard charging and driven, not really hard to slow me down, but I started having these periods of time where I couldn't have a conversation with you. It would feel like this one-on-one conversation would have felt like I was in like a packed auditorium, like that much, fear around it. But then that would pass, right? And all of a sudden I'd feel like completely opposite. And for the next few days, I'd feel just like high as a kite, on top of the world, staying up all night, talking a mile a minute. And that went on for a while, like towards, the latter years I was in college and in my early adulthood. And I didn't really mention it to anybody. I didn't talk about it. I just sort of thought, I don't know, I thought I could manage whatever it was. I didn't know what it was, but I thought I could kind of just keep it under wraps. But it got worse and worse, right? And it started being like 2 weeks at a time where I was feeling extremely depressed, and it was no longer and the thoughts I was having were harder and harder to deal with. And I was thinking sometimes every minute of every day about hurting myself. That's how bad the state I was in was. And then on the flip side, I didn't know what it was, but at the time, what it was manic. When I was manic, I was again like high as a kite, but for 2 weeks, and could operate with like no sleep, a little bit of food, a lot of drugs and alcohol. And I was just, again, on top of the world, blowing through all my money, racking up credit card charges, just kind of flying. And sooner or later, like those mood swings got so extreme I'll never forget the one I had that landed me in the psychiatric hospital. But I woke up one morning after being manic for a couple weeks, and I was sure, like I'm sure we're talking right now, sure that the sky is blue, that it was the worst day of my life, and that I would never, ever feel better. The thing about a depressed episode that's really hard to explain, but profoundly important, is like you don't have the awareness that it's ever going to end. Like when you have a cold or the flu, you're like, okay, I got about a week shelf life on this thing. But when you're in the middle of a depressive episode, the logic and reason is really gone, and you actually believe that this will be the way that you feel forever. And so there isn't a sense of, okay, I just got to sit this out. Your mind is completely turning on itself. And so I believe like within an hour of being awake, that not only was this the worst I'd ever felt, it was a pain that I couldn't deal with, and that it would never go away. So within maybe an hour or two, I got found by somebody, a coworker at work, and I had a knife out and was trying to hurt myself. And this guy had sort of followed me because he saw me acting very irrationally, and I blacked out. Next thing I know, he tackled me from behind. I blacked out. Next thing I know, I woke up in a psychiatric hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. And so for 2 weeks I was there, and that was when they diagnosed me as bipolar, right? Which made sense. But at the time, this was back in 2007 or so, I didn't really know that language yet, and I wasn't really familiar with it. So my very first thoughts that I can remember were like, oh my God, what if someone finds out? How do I work through this? How do I keep this a secret? And yeah, I took to drinking as the way to take care of myself the most. That gave me like an instant feeling of relief. And I continued that way for like the better part of a decade, until things got so bad that I had to change, or I pretty sure I wouldn't be here today. And that's within a year of that change is around the time I started the business. My whole life changed. My entire world changed when I stopped drinking and started taking care of my mental illness. To the point where not only was I doing okay and doing better, I had the capacity to like start a company, right? Which was awesome. And there was one key relationship, more than $1 million relationship, a priceless relationship that I'll touch on at some point here that like made this all happen. But I'll stop there though.
So, wow, I'm just taking in all that you shared, and I'm just like, man, I personally, I can't relate, but I do have I'm thinking about one guy in particular that I'm very good friends with that is an addict, and he's 20 some years since he's last had a drink or anything, but he is so adamant about not only his own sobriety, but really helping other entrepreneurs in whatever way he can with their sobriety too and stuff. And that is just something that just totally drives him and inspires him, and I'm sure helps him too and stuff. And I anybody that I'm sure that is listening to this that has dealt with something similar is probably like, wow, what? I mean, they're totally relating. And so we're gonna make sure we give them way, because that's the whole purpose of this doggone podcast, is to facilitate relationships and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just shared, just keeping it real about your own experience, I guarantee you've got people listening to this going, man, I want to get to know Dave more. And so,
yeah, I mean, it wasn't always that way. Like, I didn't start this is new as far as me wanting to be vulnerable and outward and vocal about this. Like, I made choices to take care of myself. This was back 11 years ago or so, and turned my life around in a huge way. But I was still really quiet about it. People knew I had stopped. I mean, people knew around me that I'd stopped drinking, of course. But I didn't tell anybody about the bipolar diagnosis other than and it had been years. But only a few people close to me knew. But I got to a point, within the last year or two of being like, okay, cool. So I had this obstacle and there's no shame about it. There's no stigma, to me. It's who I am. I have bipolar disorder, big fucking deal. It's just part of what I deal with. And 1 in 5 people have at least moderate mental illness or disorder, right? So a lot of people have depression, bipolar, OCD, and more severe ones too. That's a lot of people, right? Yeah. But you don't really talk about it with 1 in 5 people. It's usually invisible. And so I got to a point of being like, okay, I've made these things happen for myself, and I'm happier now than I ever thought I could be. In terms of what I have and what my life looks like. But that's not enough. Not only do I want to keep building on what I've accomplished, I want other people that are struggling to where I was, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever. I want at the same crossroads I was of keep going this way and you probably won't survive, or go this way and tap into all that you were capable of if you just took care of yourself, and leave a happy and better life. And I just decided okay, I want to keep doing well myself, but like I want it for other people too. And that became really key. Yeah, and it's kind of like I think of self-care as like taking off the handcuffs, like I was trying to function in a world where I wasn't taking care of an illness, where I was self-medicating, yet you convince yourself that like you're functioning fine, that like you don't need to change those things because you convince yourself that it's okay. As ridiculous as it looks now, I really believe that like I had it configured in a way that I could keep going like this forever. But in reality, like there's a lot of things, even if you don't have a disorder, mental or physical, there's a lot of things that we don't do for ourselves that would allow us to like fully tap into our abilities, whatever, our intelligence, our entrepreneurial spirit, our creativity, our problem solving. We get in the way of those a lot by just not taking care of ourselves. And that might be, yeah, I mentioned drinking, like that might be, a daily drinking habit that we tell ourselves is like, it's okay. Like I'm making it to work every day, therefore I'm fine. Well, what if you remove that obstacle, and that blocker from your life? Like, what more could you do? Like, sure, you've managed to get it to work at 9 a.m., but are you 100%? Are you operating at your full capacity? If you have an illness or a disorder and you're not treating it because you're not going to your psychiatry appointments, so you're not seeing your physician, and you're just kind of operating with something that's going wrong physically or mentally, when you're in your office or when you're with your partner or when you're with your friends, are you really there with 100% of your mind, your heart, your body? And that all kind of ties into the entrepreneurial thing for me. Like I didn't stop drinking because I wanted to start a business. It wasn't even about my career at all. It was about saving my relationship, my partner, and surviving. Like that's straight up. Like I remember when I went to the chemical dependency recovery program, my partner, she took me there. She's like, you're going here. If you want me by your side through this still, like this is what you need to do. And I remember I talked to the psychologist there, like on my intake appointment. Talked to her for like 20 minutes and just told her like where I was at and what my life had looked like. She told me straight up, dude, she was like, you are not going to survive. She knew me for 20 minutes and she told me I was going to die if I didn't make major changes right then, starting with not drinking anymore. And I believed her. Like that's where I was at. So when I stopped, it was really just like, okay, I gotta save what I've got here in the most fundamental sense. I need to survive. But then it was like all of a sudden, 3 months later, my body felt better. 6 months later, my relationship felt like we met again for the first time. A year later, I'm kicking ass at work. 2 years later, I'm like, fuck it. I'm on a roll. Like, let me try to start a business and we'll see how that goes. And that's when I got the sublet with the guy. And so taking care of myself, I wasn't always going to be an entrepreneur. Like I wasn't always going to do this no matter what. It took tapping into like every bit of ability that I have and taking the steps necessary to take care of myself. That's how that all happened,
Wow. I'll tell you, you sharing this, Dave, is going to give so many people so much hope, because I can tell you from doing what I do for as long as I've been doing it and having so many just intimate, really personal conversations with so many entrepreneurs over the years, that we've all got our own demons that we're battling stuff, and maybe it's addiction, maybe it's something else, but you are going to connect with so many people on this. And I know, I usually structure this just a little bit different, and this will be a first once again, because I don't even need to reiterate the question around relationships, because you've already alluded to that there is a single relationship in your life that
yeah.
really instrumental in all this. And so I just want to segue into that
Yeah,
and give you the opportunity to just really honor this person, whoever it is.
yeah,
And I'm
there's no doubt
I am
about
all ears, man. I want to hear this story.
it. So I met, okay, so the person that was with me through this whole decade that I described and watched me go down a, man, call it rock bottom, call it a dark place, let's call it whatever. The person that was there that watched me battle with mental illness and addiction, who saw me, who picked me up from jail, who saw me get, hurt, arrested, bloodied. The person that saw that up close, she's my wife today, and we have a fucking baby, and we have a house, and we have a life together, and we're gonna have dinner tonight. That person that stayed with me this whole time, she's the only reason I am here. I don't mean meeting with you. I mean, she's the reason I'm in this fucking world, dude. Like, she is an angel that I was so fortunate to meet. And we met at work. We met at the place when things started really going in a difficult way for me. We had already met. We worked with at-risk kids together. She's wonderful. Her first job and my first job out of college was working with at-risk kids in the juvenile justice system and the foster care system. Okay. So go figure. That's the kind of person she was to begin with. And when we met, I was in good shape. I had started to deal with some of these symptoms I mentioned, but for the most part, it was like I was doing fine, and I didn't have any there were no real red flags yet, or if there were, I was ignoring them. But and we started a really awesome relationship, and she watched up close as things really went in a bad direction for me. I remember when she came to visit me in the psychiatric hospital, I was devastated to see her there, because I was afraid that she would think that I had gone insane. Like, that's how I thought of it, was like, she'll never talk to me again because I've lost my mind, but no, she came in and she stayed for all the visiting hours that they'd let her stay, which was only 1 hour at a time, but she came in, and I couldn't really talk. So we just held each other. She just stayed there as long as she could and let me just be next to her. And she moved out to California with me after we stopped working there. And she never gave up on me, even when it probably looked like there wasn't much hope. And when I finally got to that spot where I knew what was obvious, which was that I needed to stop and change course, she told me, like, I can't watch this anymore, and I can't watch this up close. I can't not know if you're going to make it home. And if you want me here, this has to change. And if she had given up on me, I wouldn't have. There's just no doubt about it. But she took me to the chemical dependency recovery program. She supported me along the way. She was everything to me. And like I mentioned, within that first year, all of a sudden I'm taking my medication every day. I'm not drinking. It was like we met again for the first time. That's how I'd see it. It's like whoever I was that she met all those years prior, like, the best parts of him were back. And it was kind of like we started over. And then within a couple of years of that, we got married. We got married out in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And it was just one of the best days of my life, right up there with when our baby was born. And that's the relationship, because without her, like, none of this happens. Without her, I don't know that I'm here. And certainly without her, if I am here, it's not in a place where I'm running a business and helping people and helping my employees and helping our residents. I'm not in a place where I'm helping people who maybe are listening that need their own words of encouragement and empathy to deal with what they're dealing with, to let them know that this kind of life is possible, no matter how much you're struggling. I'm not here for any of that stuff. And yeah, I mean, we've been married 12 years anniversary last October. We have an 18-month-old baby boy, and I'm just so great. I'm grateful to her like every single day. Like she's, I think about that. I think about her as an angel that came into my life that I'm grateful for every single day. So that's the $1 million relationship, man. But I tell you, it's priceless.
Yeah,
No price tag on that.
absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and I've got to share this because when you and I spoke last week, and you know, and I was kind of probing at you a little bit, you know, because as I do with every person that I interview, you know, okay, you know, how can I best support you and serve you, and for you, Dave, you were like, you know, Kev, for my business, man, I'm just in a really good place. My pipeline is full. We're doing well, and I'm really not even focused on like connections there are not what I would really value right now. And you have written a book and talking about this, and I know that you know what you want is you want to get the book out there, you want to get the message out there. But what was really just really hit me about this whole thing is that you are actively engaged at investing your time and finances into this book, and yet it's a complete labor of love. This where it sits right now is it's not a revenue generating thing for you. That's not even how you're looking at this. This is an impact thing all the way. And I've been thinking
Absolutely.
about this since our conversation last week, and I'm like, man, how can I not want to get involved and helping Dave? And so, share a little bit about your book, and I'm just going to plant this seed right now for anybody that's listening to this. If what Dave is sharing, if it's resonating with you, and you want to help Dave in his endeavor to do what he's about to share with you, then by all means, get in touch with him, man. So
Yeah,
tell me
like
what
you said,
got going on.
yeah. So it all, like you said, it is about impact. A lot of money is going in, but I don't expect any to come out. But that is okay. So it all started. It started as therapy. Honestly, I started writing years ago. I don't know if it was like the advice of a therapist or just best practice. I just started journaling, and I was just kind of writing about, you know, my life before, and dealing with alcoholism, and it was just started to turn into kind of a long. I had a lot to say. It turned out a lot of stories, a lot of reflections on it. So from like it went from journal to kind of just a collection of sort of, I'd say, short stories. And then at some point along the way, someone's like, why don't you just write a book? I mean, you basically wrote a book. You just need to like staple this all together. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I don't know. I'll do it for my own kind of sense of fulfillment, but, you know, probably keep it to myself, you know. And so I started just putting more time into it. And next thing I knew, I had a manuscript, and I started working with an editor to polish it. And then I was just like, you know what, why would I put this together and not share it with why would I not share this with myself from 15 years ago, whoever that person is? And so I just kind of went on a mission. And about, 6 months ago, I started doing more interviews and building more content and building a platform around it to get a little bit of exposure and start putting just little messages out there in the mental health and recovery community. And hopefully those are reaching people and helping people. And I'm currently in the process of, I'd like to get the book out by the end of the year, figuring out what the best method of that is, and bringing it to different agents and publishers to, see if there's a good fit. But one way or another, it's getting out. There's no doubt about it. Because I want I wish I had read this book when I was 28 or 27 or 20 or 30 or whatever. I wish I had read this book and been like, damn, there's a pathway out of this where I'm at right now. Someone has been here, and 10 years later, they started a business and they have this a kid. Because I wouldn't have thought that was possible or that I could do it. And so I want to relate to, empathize with, and just basically hold a mirror up for that person so that they can light the path for them a little bit, so that they can get to wherever their potential wants to take them. It doesn't need to be like business. It could be whatever their best version of themselves is. I want people to be able to get back to it and find that, so that they could be the artist they wanted to be, or the chef, or the scholar, or the business owner, or whatever. And so I spend a lot of my time on that now. And, I'm obviously running the real estate company still, but a lot of my time every day goes to this endeavor with the hope of really changing the dialogue around mental health, around addiction, particularly in the young adult male community, where there still is this like sense of stigma, that there's a hesitancy to talk about depression, to talk about mental illness or disorders, because they're still associated in this kind of fucked up way, but they're still associated with a sense of weakness, or this archaic notion that means there's something wrong with us. But in reality, like I said before, like 1 in 5 people deal with this, just the same as any other physical condition that people might have. But we look at this one in a different way, and we shouldn't, because that's what's getting in the way of people talking about it. And you're not going to get help until you start talking about it, because you're not going to acknowledge that there's an issue and be vulnerable to it. And that's going to get in the way of you ever talking to a doctor, or talking to a specialist, or looking inside yourself a little bit to see what other steps you can take. And ultimately that just leads to somebody living at less than 100% of their happiness, their potential, their capacity for whatever it is that they want to do.
Yeah. Amen. And what you said is so dead on. The only way for people to get the support they need is to be able to talk about it. To be able to just have heart-to-heart conversations with people that understand, that have been there, that can, offer their support, offer their help, offer their insight and perspective, and just allow you to be seen, heard, and understood too, and and that's where it comes. And so this is one of the most unique interviews that I've done on this podcast over the last.
And you've done a lot.
We've released almost 200 episodes as of now, and this has been really awesome. And so, for anybody listening to this, Dave, who is just like, man, Kev, I really love Dave. I love the way he shows up. I love what he stands for. I want to find out more about the work he's doing, because either I or somebody in my life is somebody that would really find that valuable, or I want to just help and support Dave in what he's doing. What's the next step? Like, anybody wants to get a hold of you, find out how they can support you, get involved with you. How do they?
A few ways, and thank you so much. I would love that. So I've got a website, davidshamszad.com. Last name spelled Shamszad. I've got an Instagram account where I do put a lot of excerpts and quotes from my book, as well as interviews and other things. And that's David_Shamszad, again, Shamszad. Those are the best 2 places right now to find me. And if you manage to spell my name right, and you get on there, there's also a LinkedIn and some other stuff. But go to one of those spots. That's where I'm doing the most to promote, to advocate for the mental health and recovery community, and promote my book.
Awesome. And I'll I'll make sure that we include links with the show notes, so to make it
Oh, cool.
nice and easy
Perfect.
for folks too and stuff. And so,
Sounds great.
Dave, I want to thank you so much for taking your time to have this conversation. Any last thing you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, I mean, there's something I just remind myself of every day. There's 100 inflection points in every day where you're faced with something difficult, and it might be something small or it might be something big you're working on, but we just have a choice every day. I always remind myself to choose courage. I can't control all the cards I've been dealt, and having a mental illness wasn't what I asked for, but I have choices every day on how I deal with that, and just always remember to choose the harder thing. Be courageous and choose the harder thing, whether it's growing your career, your business, your passion. We usually have a choice every day to do something that's harder, as we're working on that, and so choose courage.
Amen. Well, Dave, once again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I am so excited to get this out there and share it with folks. And yeah, thanks again. Really appreciate you, man.